All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Forward Food's second webinar of the year, The Business Case for Plant-Based, How Companies Can Profit from the Plant-Based Revolution. My name is Rihanna Topan, and I have been managing HSI Canada's Forward Food program since 2017, shortly after we held our first event in Canada. As you may know, Forward Food helps businesses and institutions across Canada increase their offerings of delicious and nutritious plant-based options for environmental, health, and animal welfare and cost-saving benefits. We provide culinary training, recipes and menu development support, educational sessions, and help with marketing and communications, all free of charge. In exchange for our services and support, we ask that the institutions and businesses we work with to sign the Forward Food Pledge, transitioning 20% of their current menu offerings to plant-based. This achievable and impactful goal demonstrates a strong commitment to better, more sustainable food. We're here to help food service professionals meet this target every step of the way. We also offer information and resources to individuals who want to make more healthy, sustainable, and compassionate food choices. Over the next 90 minutes, we will hear from our expert panelists on how the inclusion of plant-based foods on menus and shelves can attract new customers, increase sales, and even in some cases, reduce costs. We hope this webinar will be valuable to both professionals in the food industry as well as individuals who want to learn more about the plant-based space. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and will be available online in the days after the event. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Alex Wichert, Forward Food Coordinator. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Rihanna. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. As Rihanna said, my name is Alex Wichert, and I am the Forward Food Coordinator for Humane Society International Canada. We are thrilled to have so many professionals from across the food service industry, as well as individuals simply looking to learn more in today's session. I would like to begin now with a land acknowledgement. Although we are tuning in from different locations across Canada and perhaps the United States, we are all living on colonized, occupied land. We recognize that true reconciliation begins with land and requires ongoing support of Indigenous groups, communities, and nations, as well as partnership and collaboration when appropriate. This acknowledgement is important at all times, given that colonialism is ongoing, but it is especially significant after last month's discovery of 215 children's remains as a residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. At this time, I invite you to reflect for a moment on the land you call home and the Indigenous nations of that area. I, for example, am in Mississauga, Ontario, part of Treaty 13A and traditional land of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Wendat and Inwensio. We recognize the opportunity to work and live on this land just as Indigenous peoples did and continue to do today. Thank you. Today's webinar is sponsored by two Canadian brands, the organic and plant-based food company, Floating Leaf Fine Foods, and the dairy alternative company, Culture. All webinar attendees will receive a digital coupon from Floating Leaf Fine Foods, and in addition, all attendees will be automatically entered into a draw in which winners will receive one of 6 prizes from Floating Leaf Fine Foods or one of 6 prizes from Cultured. Your choice while supplies last. Thank you to both Floating Leaf Fine Foods and Cultured for their generous sponsorship. I would now like to introduce our panelists for today. First, we are pleased to have with us Donna Bottrell, RD. A registered dietitian and Red Seal cook with 25+ years of diversified experience, Donna is Dana Hospitality's Director of Culinary Nutrition Innovation. Donna provides strategic direction and solutions for innovative food and wellness initiatives by using a holistic approach, which connects all 3 attributes of wellness, culinary, and sustainability in both retail and residential food service settings. Donna also supports actions that align with Dana Hospitality's brand belief to transform the food service experience every day. These actions include taking a food-first approach and preparing delicious meals from scratch on a daily basis. This year, Donna is leading Dana Hospitality's commitment to the Forward Food Pledge by providing a how-to guide, as well as consumer messaging for encouragement of both culinary teams and guests to include more plants in their meals and snacks. Next, we have Brad Scherer. Born and raised in the Greater Toronto area, Brad is Director of Sales Canada for Greenleaf Foods. He attended Western University as well as Ryerson University with a focus on business, psychology, and the arts. After graduation, Brad switched his passion from logistics to the consumer packaged goods industry. He settled in with Maple Leaf Foods through multiple sales and strategy roles. A self-declared plant-based geek and lifestyle enthusiast, Brad recently pivoted within the Maple Leaf organization to join its Greenleaf Foods side of business. Our third panelist is Chef Stéphanie Audet. You may be familiar with Chef Stéphanie's work. She was the creative mind responsible for curating menus at Montreal's Celebrate Love restaurants from 2016 to 2018. She is now chef owner of Senhor, a popular vegetable-forward and natural wine bar in Lisbon, Portugal. Chef Stéphanie is also the author of cookbook La Cuisine Botanique, an expert in plant-based cuisine and winner of many culinary prizes, competitions, and television appearances. Her kitchen celebrates the use of seasonal, local, and organic foods from the earth, in which freshness is one of the key pillars. Chef Stéphanie opened her first restaurant in Hawaii, working exclusively on a plant-based menu before she spent a decade traveling while achieving creative culinary projects. In addition to Senhor Uva, Chef Stéphanie runs a second project, Senhor Manuel. She is constantly searching for innovative ways to highlight vegetables on her own menus and joins us from Portugal. Welcome to our three panelists, and thank you very much for joining us. We have a series of questions prepared for each of our speakers today, after which time we will open the discussion to audience questions. We welcome you to contribute to the conversation as the audience through Zoom's chat feature at any time during today's webinar, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A. Now, we know that plant-based foods have so many benefits for our planet, our health, and other animals. Our topic today is about another opportunity in the plant-based space, one which affects any business, entrepreneur, or professional. That is the bottom line. How can making plants a bigger part of your menu improve cost savings? What exactly is this business potential of the plant-based revolution? After all, the plant-based food industry is only growing. The Plant-Based Foods Association and the Good Food Institute reported that, quote, US retail sales of plant-based foods continue to increase by double digits in 2020, growing 27% and bringing the total plant-based market to $7 billion. And this revolution is not slowing down. BayStreet.ca recently wrote an article called "The Plant-Based Market Revolution Could Sprout to $85 billion by 2030, while The Spoon, a daily news source which provides reports and insights into the food tech revolution, published in March that alt protein could be a $290 billion market by 2035. More and more people are choosing foods which are better for themselves, for animals, and for the environment. And while not entirely, younger generations are largely driving these developments. Food Dive's article, Food is Gen Z's Top Spending Priority, Survey Finds, analyzed a Piper Sandler report when it wrote that 23% of Gen Z's money went to food this spring. Now combine that with the fact that, quote, Gen Z has shown a preference for healthy eating, including more organic and natural foods that are free of additives, and you can see how plant-based foods really are the foods of the future. One example that can frame today's dialogue is a case highlighted in a recent video about the University of Victoria's work to make plants the default option on their menus. As part of University of Victoria's Climate Solutions Challenge, registered dietitian, sessional instructor, and project director with the Animals and Society Research Initiative on the default veg proposal, Nicole Federley, explains in this video that the default veg model proposes that plant-based options be the default across campus food outlets and catering. The film tells a powerful story involving an example from the University of Cambridge's catering service. They introduced a sustainable food policy in 2016, which promoted plant-based options and excluded such options as ruminant meat from menus. The environmental benefits were significant, and as Nick White, head of operations, University Catering Service explains, they also, quote, reduced food waste to a certain extent. Even more important for today's conversation, Nick White goes on to explain that the sustainable success and experience, quote, demonstrated that we were able to do that without impacting on our operations, without impacting on our financial performance. We maintained our market sales share, increased sales, and we increased our bottom line. So more than anything else, it demonstrated to us that you can achieve sustainability without damaging your business. From where I sat, it was a great success. It's a wonderful example of what is possible with plant-based foods. As Nicole Federley explains in the video, quote, the bottom line for food service operators is that offering more plant-based foods and other healthier items does not decrease sales. It just shifts into better choices. So we'll share the video URL at the end of this webinar so that you can watch this information at your leisure. For now, let's get started with our panel discussion. Let's begin with you, Chef. Quite simply, why have you always highlighted vegetables and organic foods from the earth on your menus?
Well, I think first of all, it sounds weird, but I'm like a very big vegetable lover. I'm like when I was young, I kind of became vegetarian without knowing what it was, just because I didn't like the taste of meat. And I hope my mom is not watching the webinar, because I think it was her fault. It was always like really dry or really stringy. And like, I was like, can I eat all the vegetables? And one of my sisters didn't eat vegetables. So I was like, it was okay, you know? And then as like working as a cook and a chef in like many restaurants, I always insisted to say, okay, I want to show how eating vegetarian or vegan could be fun, because all like what seduced me, like the first restaurant I worked at was like really nice, and like it was a hotel in Tofino, and like it was an art of dining. And why plant-based cuisine didn't have that? It was like you go to like kind of a like place with not good service and like shredded carrots, like not much salt, and I was like, this is not true. Plant-based cuisine could be the art of dining, served with a very nice wine, and it could be nice, you know? So I kind of became my mission to try to do like optimal like cuisine and do something that was like enjoyable. And like when I say optimal, it was a word that kind of followed me all my career, and I'm trying to explain it because I did a contest one that um like the vegan offshore of like, I don't know how to explain this, like some, if you don't want to eat like not plant-based like sugar, you will go to like white sugar, for example. And I'm like, is this better? Like it's full of additive, it's full of bad product, you know? It's like, it's bad also for your health, you know? Why don't we find the optimal thing of like, I like my way of like working with plant-based food is to promote them in a natural way, not just like, okay, it has to be vegan, let's like use all this additive to make it look like meat or taste like meat, but then it's not. Like my philosophy is really to use like the integral and no additive, and like make it as pure as possible. So like this, it's optimal for your health, yes, but for the planet and for the animals, it's like it has to be like conscious for everybody. So that's been my fight.
Thank you for sharing that, Chef. Origins, of course, very important as you're discussing your journey to opening these businesses. And I want to ask a question about origins and backstory to Brad as well. Could you tell us how you got involved with Greenleaf Foods and why plant-based proteins have become such an important focus for its parent company, Maple Leaf Foods?
Yes, for sure. And obviously, thanks for kicking it off with a lot of those stats. Provide a lot of context. And so I was just double checking that they line up with what some of the things that I have in my head, and they do, which is good. So anyway, yes, and thanks for having me on here. For me personally, like I said, you touched on earlier, Alex, I started with Maple Leaf Foods about a decade ago, actually on the animal protein side of our business, which is what a lot of Canadians would recognize. Ever since we had the Listeria issue back in 2008 with Maple Leaf, which was kind of a turning point for us. Michael McCain's been uber focused on his legacy, sustainability, and just an overall pride in the business. Food safety, health forward, things like that. And so the company itself has invested in a lot of different ways. And obviously, back in 2019, we kind of announced our being the first major carbon neutral food company, major company on the world. And so that's something that's been kind of a pride point for us. And so anyway, so I've been with the animal protein side of our business for the better part of a decade. And then when, obviously with Maple Leaf and the sustainability and carbon neutrality, plant-based is a big portion of that to help offset some of the greenhouse gases and things. And that's how we kind of balance things out. And so with the investment to purchase Field Roast and Light Life, which are our two kind of brands you'd see in the market, underneath Greenleaf, which fit underneath Maple Leaf. The focus has really been around the plant-based business, and as you touched on, Alex, with the double-digit growth, roughly around 30% year over year. There's obviously a business choice there as well as as a sustainable one. So for me, I personally kind of moved to a plant-based diet about 3 or 4 years ago, just as a runner. I just find typically, even as I've gotten older, more kind of plant-based I adopted in my diet, less inflammation, things like that. I could recover faster. And so I love to test things. I love to test my body. So I went, I've done all kinds of diets from, paleo to, the carnivore diet to just to the Mediterranean, and doing blood tests as well to kind of see how I react to it. I just personally found that like a kind of a whole foods plant-based diet for the most part just helps me perform better. And so when Maple Leaf kind of expanded into the plant-based side of things, it just made complete sense for me as a passion to get into wanting to do that. And so it's going to remain one of our biggest sectors and our biggest focuses for the next couple of years. I think we're looking at roughly $300 million in investment in the plant-based side of our business in the next couple of years as the plant-based sector grows. A big focus for us is obviously cleaner ingredient decks, things like that. And I can touch on some of that later in terms of the misconceptions of what people think, plant-based meat alternatives. Are they healthy? Are they not? But for me, it just seemed like the right time to go. I think Maple Leaf is doing the right things. I'm very, very proud to work for them. They're focused on it. And it's exciting. The plant-based space on the food service side of things, in retail as well, it's all about pace. It's unbelievable how fast things move. So.
Thank you, Brad. I'm glad that you mentioned motivations, whether the importance for environment or for health, because I want to ask a similar question to Donna related to Dana Hospitality. Donna, why does Dana Hospitality believe it is so important to integrate more plant-based options on menus and support more plant-based diets for guests?
For me, the key word in that question is more. When you think about plant-based, it's not new. We've been doing it for years and years and years. But traditionally, when I think about some of those things that have changed, traditionally chefs may have thought, I need to have plant-based for my vegans and vegetarians. I make only enough. And if somebody else comes and eats it, I run out. So from a traditional perspective, we're trying to change, right? The mentality and the traditional way of doing things. So it's way beyond that group. And really it's aligned with the brand belief, right? And we know it's healthier and more sustainable to eat more plants, especially from our scratch cooking, right? That's all good, right? So we're making sure, but we want to entice all our guests to add more plants to their meals, right? So wherever they're at, we want to get them to eat more. And again, the other problem, or not the other part of that, is we serve people where they work and where they go to school for a lion's share of the business, right? So this isn't a treat meal. This is, I'm heating here often. It could be every day, right? So again, we're their second kitchen, and we have to feed them well, right? We have to make sure that they're getting what they need. And the other thing that I find interesting is more and more of our guests are ready, right? So this is hard to do if your guests aren't ready, right? And because of our environment is a mixed environment, we have all kinds of eaters. We have to have enough engaged, right? But it's also our job to get them going. But I find with the last year and a half, this has really helped people find a different way of looking around food and looking at food. And I think they see value. The hardest part in the past is people understanding the value of what's on the plate and the health benefits of the other ingredients. So, they perceive value as that 5 to 6 ounces of meat, poultry, seafood in the center of the plate. So now they are starting to understand there's value and benefits of all the other ingredients that are there. And the last but really cool part of all this for us is that this has been a great way to fuel chef creativity and curiosity. We have chefs that have been doing this for years, cooking for years, and they're getting bored, right? So now you add all these techniques and these ingredients and everything else, and it really fires everybody back up. And that's what we need to do. And really, so excited to see this finally. As a dietitian who's been teaching this for 20-something years, just making sure we have more plants on the plate. This is amazing. So, thanks.
Thank you, Donna. I think Chef wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, I'm just so happy to see your motivation and your inspiration. Like, this is exactly what's contagious. And then if people see someone like you being inspired, and then they're like, obviously I want to eat this and I want to add more. And now these days, there's enough information around in the world that people are like more responsible in their choice. And I wish I went to one of your food service. Like when I was in school, I couldn't eat anything from the cafeteria because I was trying to be vegetarian in high school and stuff. And I was like, I cannot eat anything.
French fries, right? Yeah, when you think about how things have changed, it's amazing, just amazing.
Yeah.
You did touch on this a bit, or quite a bit rather, Donna, in your response, but I would like just to ask a little bit more about the reception from guests, but as well as your own staff and colleagues in response to your new plant-forward focus and any plant-based options you've introduced.
Yeah, so one of the things is we're still early in the journey, right? So when you think about when we've made the commitment, it's this year, so we're still early, but generally speaking, it's been positive for a lot of the reasons I just touched on. You know, when I think of college university market, this isn't easy, right? It's an easy win. That gang is already engaged, right? So they're like, bring it on, bring more, bring interesting ingredients. We've got this. This is wonderful. But what we are finding is in our, you know, other businesses and other areas is we have to make sure we have that right balance, right? So between the animal and the protein and how it's the animal and the plant proteins, just making sure that we are being different. We are not cookie cutters. So it's not about every cafe has to do this the same. They need to adjust what they're doing based on their clientele, their guests, right? And where they're at in their own continuum. So, but what's been really important is for our teams to understand what this is, right? Because if they don't understand it, you know, how do I do this? They're going to struggle, right? And they're going to do some things. So for example, I'll give you just a couple examples of things that guests or clients have come back to us so far. So one is athletes. You mentioned, Brad, that you're an athlete, right? You're running and getting, you know, when we're trying to get people to think beyond the 2 chicken breasts every meal to get their protein, just helping people understand where is the protein and that how does it all add up, right? So just making sure that we're sharing that, you know, that positive messaging with our guests and helping them to understand that there is protein in the animal, you know, focused items that we serve. The other thing is that's an interesting one that's come up is, you know, 3 things on the menu in the hot table, and you know, chef was just kind of getting into her groove and put a vegan and a plant-based and a plant-forward item on, and then an animal item based item on. And sure enough, the client's like, whoa, what's going on? Are you changing everything? So again, there's reassurances, there's finding the right place in each location that makes sense for that environment. And then the last one is, you know, I love, this is of course what we live for, is where it's the surprise, right? So had a certain account had a special, and it was a beet, bean and oat burger that they, you know, that the chefs created. We're like, I don't know if this is going to go as a special. And sure enough, it went so well, it got added to the core menu. And this was in an environment that was a beef burger environment, right? Like, so those are the things that then the chef goes, aha, right? The light bulb goes on and they understand that this can work anywhere. And you really do have to sell it. And you have to make sure that you're telling the story. Yeah.
Did you want to respond, Chef? I saw you were unmuted again.
No, I'm just super happy about everything, like to motivate people, and like I think to not force people and say today is all like plant and there's no meat anymore, and like this is like gonna scare people away, because we all have our little habits and we're all at different moments, and changing a diet, if you have a full-time job, you do live under stress. If there's other stuff going on like COVID and like all this like heavy things on your mind, it could be like really, really hard. And to just like add it like, hey, today's a special, that bean and oat beet burger looks really good. I will be like,
and sampling,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and sampling, because people could be scared and then they're like, wow, it actually tastes really good, because you can make it taste really good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important not scare people.
for sure.
Well, certainly. And tailoring the approach depending on your audience, what they're expecting is so important. And that's a perfect segue into my question for you, Brad. What type of reception for plant-based consumer packaged goods have you seen both on retail shelves and just in food service trends?
Yeah, for sure. First, I just love the conversation too. I love the passion and energy. It's one thing I find with the plant-based spaces, there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, and you can kind of see that in kind of our discussions. A lot of times in our business meetings and stuff in our day-to-day, we get sidetracked with a separate conversation about, you know, the latest and greatest in plant-based and innovation and what's coming, which I can touch on a little later. I would say for the most part, just to answer your question there, you know, again, in terms of customers, you know, perception and reception of the products, you know, I think customers are looking for something new. You know, kudos to Beyond and Vega and some of those companies who kind of brought plant-based to the forefront. You know, and so when you look at the plant-based meat side of things, you know, it's kind of always been a burger. It's always been a burger or ground beef or things like that. And that's typically just because it's been easier for the, you know, product development teams and creators to replicate ground beef. And so overall, like, you know, said, to kind of echo your points, for the most part, you can see on the retail shelves, roughly 30% growth, 33%, I think it was in Canada last year. Food service is actually growing faster. Food service North America, I think there was 37% growth on the plant-based meat alternative side of things. And you're just seeing more and more kind of larger scale operators just adopting plant-based onto their menu full time and really going big with it. I mean, I think that's what's important too, is making, you know, making a statement about it, you know, and making sure people are aware. And so for the most part, like I said, consumers, you know, I've kind of, they've seen the burger, you know, and they're looking for the next best thing. So, you know, when we think about what that looks like, it's things like plant-based chicken, you know, plant-based seafood and cheeses, obviously, and just different types and more artisanal types of plant-based cheeses, things like that, pepperoni, all these kind of unique items, and consumers are really looking for that. And, you know, and across the country, when you look at it, there's really double-digit growth across the country within Canada specifically. You know, with most regions, you know, kind of in the 20 to 30% growth range. Quebec typically tends to be a bit of a softer area for consumers. I think it's just more around the, you know, the idea and a lot of the kind of European cultures that are adopted there. Yeah, and I would say that just the last thing too is really just to echo some of the points that Stephanie was just talking about, and is really just around consumer perception and your own belief. Like during a pandemic, initially when, you know, the pandemic first hit a year ago, you know, a lot of people kind of revert back to what's comfortable to them, right? Like what's comfortable to me, and that might be, you know, meat and potatoes or whatever it is. It's easy, it's a staple, you know, it's reliable, it's there. You know, you know, cost wise, it's efficient usually. And so, but what's changed is as the pandemic has kind of evolved over the last years, people now realize, okay, well, what's important is obviously is maintaining health, right? And you think about your own mortality during the pandemic, and you think about these steps that you can take to actually, you know, try and improve those chances of that, you know, and avoid illness and things like that. And so initially we saw a bit of a lull in the plant-based side of things, both retail and food service, but then really kind of at the end of last summer when things started to open up, depends on which region you live in or what part of the world you're in. But people are really willing to commit to kind of adopting more health forward plant-based things and menu items. And so for the most part, consumers are looking for more. It's not going away. Like I said, there's double-digit growth, and they want the next best thing, and they want something that's going to be, you know, like I said, high protein, obviously, though I'd argue that most people in the world aren't protein deficient, or most people in North America aren't protein deficient. High fiber, things like that they're looking for, and really they want cleaner ingredient decks, right? Like a lot of the plant-based meat alternative things have 20 ingredients. And so people obviously ask themselves as a consumer, I certainly did it. You know, you have a chicken breast, which is 1 ingredient, and you have a burger, which is 15 or 16 ingredients. And so, you know, for the most part, like trying to work down the ingredient deck and keep to things that, you know, you can pronounce is kind of where I would say where the trends are going.
Certainly sounds, Brad, like you've itemized these steps, and you've mentioned that it's important to have these processes in place in order to ensure success. And that is a question I want to ask you, Chef Stéphanie, because you've opened, of course, or led several plant-based or plant-forward restaurants. So what would you say are the major steps you take to ensure success with each new business venture?
I think, like, first of all, you have to do like a great study of like a market study, and to understand the neighborhood you're in, the city, and then after like where the rest of the world is at. Like I remember when we were opening Love in Montreal, we were like, okay, we'll do something different. It's very important creating a new like plan forward place to create your own style and not just do, oh, we'll do exactly like this one next door, you know, and like this pool of client will therefore just be, oh, I want to go there or there. Like their need of like, oh, it's my healthy Saturday, like my healthy Friday lunch, salad lunch, you know, so I'll go there or there. Like it's kind of the same. It's to be different and create your own style, create your own like highlights on the menu. And at first we were like, okay, let's do like people are in a hurry, so let's do something where people are served fast and they're going to the cash and they're like processing the order themselves and then going with the food and eating. But then I was like, wait a minute, there is not much nice plant-based restaurant where you also get served and you have nice wine and nice dishes and like or nice environment. Like when you eat with different, like you eat with your mouth and your taste buds, but you eat with your eyes, with your smell, with your ears. Like one of our plus at Senhor, everybody really likes the playlist and people are like, wow, who did the playlist? And it's me and my husband when we were creating that. But we were thinking, would I want to listen to this song if I'm like chilling, enjoying a glass of wine and a nice like meal? Okay, yes. And then we will put it on the playlist. So this all is part of the experience that you want to create in a restaurant. So I advise a lot of places too that people sometimes they're passionate and they have the fire inside and they're like, I want to open like a food truck or this or a juice bar. And I'm like, this fire is very good. It's very important. But it also needs to come with organization and like a, a, a very well done plan. Um, yeah, because it's still a business at the end and you need to make it survive for a long time. And like just like passing through COVID, it was really hard to like be okay, like we need to be aware of all the stuff that is to pay and where to put the money. And like I think like I normally don't push too much like the budget side on the marketing as a restaurant because like the word to mouth I think is what is worth the most of in a restaurant, to say, okay, if you have a good experience and you share it and you say, oh yeah, this place is so good, we want to go, we keep hearing about it. Like I think this is even, it's more worth than having like ads of like come to my restaurant or stuff like that, ads in magazines and stuff like that. And so far we refuse to like put any money on marketing, and we like instead we would like to do some pop-up events or like we're gonna like trade chefs. There's this place in town that is also like vegetarian and plant forward, and we're like, okay, the chefs are gonna exchange, and one will cook at my place, now we'll cook at his place. Like this is a nice way to do like a fun project. But yeah, I think we need, like you need to understand like the demand and the supply that is constantly changing, and it's evolving a lot since the last decades. And opening like a plant forward or plant-based place is a very good idea because there is so much missing, so much still everywhere. So yeah, I encourage people to do more. Like often people are like, oh, there's this place that opened beside you, it's also like this thing, and we're like, good, it is not a competition. Like a lot of the clients, when we had Crudescence back in the days, they're our friend La Panthère Verte, which is like the Green Panther is like a vegan like falafel shop. It's really good. They opened beside us, you know, and we're like, yes, we told them that the place was for them, you know. Like it's really important to be even like close to each other, so then it brings even more people. One time they try this place, the other time they try the other place, and then they will keep on coming. Yeah, I think it's important to keep the fire but to be organized.
Well, Chef, it certainly seems like you employed many of those steps at Love, for example, or which restaurant in which you were an executive chef, because it was very popular with a wide variety of consumers. I'd be curious to know from your perspective how you've seen guests' response to plant-based foods evolve, especially in Canada, but also around the world more generally.
I think like the focus, especially like at Love, was that's where we came up with like, let's not say it's vegetarian, because this was like in Quebec, we say, oh, it's granola people, you know, like we have this term of, oh, yeah, like it might be like it could scare people. And we were like, we don't want to create a vegetarian restaurant where all the vegetarian that are vegan or vegetarian for many years, they're coming and eat. I'm like, I want this restaurant to be for everybody, to people that are scared of eating only vegetable, that or not, or people that wants to try but they don't have the guts. Or so we made like a place very comfortable and use the term like cuisine botanique to try to like diverge from calling it vegan or vegetarian, or now it's all vegan anyway. So it's pretty cool that changing the way you call it and advertise it. When I create my cooking book, I did the same thing too. Like it was basically vegan, but then I was like, no, I don't want to be completely vegan. So I put like a couple recipes with cheese, and I think like three or four on the whole book, just to not be in the section, because I wanted this book to not be like a how to eat a vegan plate, like a diet. I want this book to be how to inspire people, how to eat more vegetable, and how to eat vegetable, and how what could you do with a carrot? Here's a lot of option. Like this was more my intention. But yeah, I think a lot of the, if we talk about the customers, it has changed a lot around the world since the last decade. And like I think it's a lot because of the movies that came out, like uh I think it was in 2008 or something like that, like Food Inc. or Forks Over Knife. Like these movie was finally like watchable, because my first, I think, was Earthlings, right? That was like, oh wow, this is really happening to the meat industry. Like this is what? How come this is even legal? And I suggest this movie to a lot of people, but me myself, it took me weeks to watch it entirely into short period, because it's quite hard. But when these movie like Food Matters and like Food Inc. arrived, that was like super gentle and user friendly to like understand this information of what's going on. I think a lot of the educational work has been done. When we started the first like Crudescence back in the days in Montreal, we were teaching a lot, doing conference, culinary demonstration with tasting, like here, taste this pie or taste this thing made with nuts, or like a lot of education. And now in like 2021, people know what to do, and they know how to save the planet, and they know that their effort could make a change one little step at a time. But if everybody's like, okay, I'm taking one little step at a time, like it's going to be really good. So yeah, I think we need to continue educate, but we need to like not scare people, and like take them in and like make them enjoy this experience of eating, not just like today I'm doing my duty, I'm going to be ecological and I will go to like eat plant-based. And like no, it's like it's fun, it's part of my life. I'm like, I'm going there because it's fun, it's so good, and I love it. And like when we opened Senhor, we never said it, because obviously in Montreal I was more known for being like the plant-based chef, and then here nobody knew me, and I was just like, oh, okay, like my husband is very good in the front of the house and the natural wine, and does the sommelier part. And I was like, what I do, I cook like this, you know, with plants. So I didn't call this the restaurant vegetarian, but I was like, let's just do it and see. And then some people came 3 or 4 times, and they were like, well, wait a minute, there's no meat anywhere on the card, like where, like what's going on, like. And they were like super surprised, because people don't even notice, because they eat well, they're satiated. Also, this is very important, if you come out and you're like, oh, I'm still hungry, this is a problem. If you ate well, you had a great experience, and you're satiated, like goal is achieved, they will come back.
So it sounds like being inclusive and also catering to all these different audiences is so important, so that they're satisfied, so they'll return, so they'll feel welcomed. Brad, who is your primary market audience, and how has Greenleaf worked to reach new audiences?
Yeah, I'm glad she touched on this earlier too, Stephanie, in terms of the vegetarian vegan. But for sure, I mean, I don't think this will surprise you guys. You probably have heard this term quite often, but the flexitarian really is our target. That's our target audience. When you think about it, really, like 2/3 of the Canadian population, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, make up the core consumer for plant-based, for the most, not just plant-based meat, but plant-based in general. You can see how kind of that's the trend. And so the flexitarian for sure, well, I think it's only 4.5% or so kind of identify as vegan in Canada, and it might be 7.5% for vegetarian. 98% of people who bought plant-based meat also bought regular meat, right? And so the flexitarian, again, really is just the person who's looking to kind of, whether for ethical, environmental, or health reasons, is kind of just to change up their diet a little bit. And because the plant-based side of things is so sexy now, and it's like there's all these great dishes, and it's not just shredded carrots like Stephanie talked about earlier. There's much more kind of, people are much more open to want to try it. And so when we think about the millennial, Gen X, Gen Z, and kind of, the flexitarian, as you would being our core consumer and our core audience, not that we don't obviously, build products or engineer products that would, that a vegetarian or vegan would have, but really we think about that, social media is very big. Digital, kind of leveraging a lot of those channels from a company standpoint is very important. Sports partnerships, things like that. Really, when you think about, like I said, millennial, Gen X, Gen Z, I think I fit into one of those somewhere. Like I said, like it's everyone's online, everyone's digital, social media, everyone's got their phone, not too far, from them. And so influencers, things like that, and whether influencers are doing it just because, they live and by those kind of, they live by that passion, like they want to be, plant-based or not. That's kind of the way, that's the best way for us to actually get, kind of our message and our brands out there. It's very, very important. Like I said, oftentimes I have to take off my sales hat because I just am plant-based myself. And so when we're thinking about how we're going to deliver a message and who we're going to kind of tailor it to, I have to think about how I would perceive it, on my end. If I was on the other end, how would I take that? And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Certainly it does. And that can be.
I think there was a question earlier too, I can touch on too. I think I saw it, Ross. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm
I was
sorry.
just going to say, he asked kind of where the reductions were. I think he was talking kind of on shelf, like if plant-based is growing so much, what's being compromised for it. And it kind of really depends. I would say it depends on the region and the segment within plant-based itself. But I would say really nothing on the animal protein side is really being overly compromised. It's still high in demand. It's still growing. You're going to see like chicken and those type of things continue to grow, especially during the pandemic and things like that. But plant-based has always been there. It's always kind of been there. Like I said, like Donna talked about it earlier with being talking about this for 27 years. The plant-based side of things, there's always been these kind of products that have existed on the menu and in retail shelves for the last 10 years. Brands like Eve's, things like that have been there for quite a while. And so really what it is the new kind of, sexier, plant-based side of things and products are really just kind of replacing some of those antiquated type products that have been there for a while. Some of them still exist because they represent something very different. They're very, grain focused, veg based. And so what you'll kind of see is you'll see really just like the plant-based meat alternatives, like burgers, Light Life Burger, things like that, kind of just exist in one or two spots on shelves right beside, kind of its meat equivalent, right? It's not going to occupy. When you think about it, really, plant-based is not all over the place when you walk into a grocery store. It's there, but it's slowly increasing. I would say it's really just taking space from some of its older products that have been on the market for quite a while.
Thanks, Brad. And you're right. It can be challenging, but it's certainly necessary to get out of your own mind when you're designing something, because we discuss plant-based, we think about these foods all the time, but the question is, how do you reach people who aren't thinking about them? So that's my question for you, Donna. How would you recommend food service leaders introduce the idea of plant-based to their teams? And what would you suggest if some team members are hesitant?
Well, first, it's starting with your team, right? Like you have to start internal first, because really they need to understand the why. And I think it's really important that how does it fit within your brand, right? So then you can go with the what and the how. But really, if I don't understand, if you're telling me I got to do something and I don't understand how this fits within our culture or our brand, and it feels like it's like just this little thing that just landed and has no connection to what you're all about, that's, if that disconnect is there, then people, it's harder to get them to come with you, right, on the journey, if they feel like you're just doing it for not necessarily the right reasons, right? So internal is really important. We, as you know, Alex, we started with the webinar in February with you know, internal groups, all our chefs and managers and stuff, and just introduced and talked about kind of what it was. And then we added the forward food, you know, to anyone who wanted to do that course. And then also our own internal chef guide, right? Just making sure that we want our chefs to play, right? We want them to try the new ingredients that we're recommending. We want them to use their culinary techniques and play in the kitchen and really, you know, fire up their creativity and not necessarily go, you must do it this way every time. We want them to be creative. But we want them to be comfortable because they are the ones who are face to face with our guests, like Stéphanie, right? Like you have to be able to have the conversations with all your different kinds of eaters and making sure that you're helping them make food decisions. We do it all the time, right? Like, what would you recommend? What can I put with this, right? Like that is our job, is to make sure that you leave satisfied, you enjoyed your meal, and you felt that your needs were taken care of, right? So that's really important. And then the other thing I know we've talked about it before, but really the vegan, vegetarian, getting away from that mindset. In our world, it really is there, like in the sense of thinking it's only for this group, and just really helping them understand it's for everyone. And like you were saying, Brad, flexitarian, that is our biggest group, right? In the sense of who we're trying to serve with this, because they're the one, it's reducing meat that's actually fueling this change. And it's a fundamental change, right? So we need everybody to be engaged. Now, when it comes to hesitancy, you know, when I was thinking about that, I'm like, oh, so why would people be hesitant? Well, it really boils down to two things. One is if the chef's comfortable. If they're a meatitarian, if you want to call it that, and they've never tried, they've never went out, like they aren't doing any of this, it's a bit scary, they don't understand to do it, there might be some hesitancy, right, to jump in. But then the other part is if they believe their guests are ready. Right? So if they don't think their guest want it, then that also makes them hesitant, because it's, you know, there's more labor, more work involved with bringing out the best out of a carrot or whatever. You know, you're doing different things. But what if I do all that effort versus just throwing a piece of meat on a grill pan, right? I go through all that effort and then my guests don't want it or don't like it, right? So again, but when they find their guests do try it and like it, oh my goodness, right? Like that just fires them right up, and they're more inclined to then experiment and try something new and keep going. So really, hesitancy is funny. It's just usually it's comfort, and you don't think your guests want it. So.
Thanks, Donna. Thank you. This has been very helpful and very enlightening so far. We have one more round of questions before our Q&A session. And for this final round, we're really going to turn our attention more to the big picture and how other people can start employing some of the information we've discussed already. So Donna, another question for you. As we mentioned before, several of Dana Hospitality's units have taken the Forward Food Pledge, and we thank you again, committing to transition 20% of their menus to plant-based. So what plant-based goals would you recommend other food service professionals or businesses set for the coming years?
Well, again, want to reiterate, not a fad, here to stay. This is only going to continue. People are going to be demanding the more sustainable, healthy approach to food service. So that is awesome. But I will say that, you know, the goals of the business, it really is dependent on the goals of the business, what kind of business, right? I can't say this approach would work for all businesses, because we're all different. If you're a chicken place versus you're this, you know, we're all dealing with different kinds of food service business. But really the goal is to increase more plant options on the menu. That's one of it. So that's why we took the 20% challenge, right? Or a commitment. But it's also elevating the plant-based and the plant forward and plants in general. So that's really important. Is we have, like, I can't stress that enough. It's got to be good. It's got to taste delicious, like Stephanie, right? Like it's got to be unbelievable. And because we want them to get just excited over the plant-based as they do over the chef doing his hand battered fried chicken, which is every commercial on the TV for the last 2 years. So that's one thing. But I think if I had to think of, like, a primary goal, it's take action, right? So you got to learn, you got to educate. So yes, people are a little bit more, but I still find there's still some gaps in the understanding of what it is. So, how can your business embrace this change within the brand, right? So you're not about change, potentially you're not about just, blowing up your brand. You're actually, how does this fit? What do I add in to enhance my brand? And then, is it a percent increase year over year? Is it playing with LTOs or limited time offers to just gauge kind of where your customers are? Like Whopper, like, you know what I mean? Impossible Burger at Burger King, really? So, those kinds of things where you're testing, right? You're testing your audience, and then, making sure that you find those internal champions, right? One thing that I love is by doing this, and since the webinar in February, we have identified champions within our midst who've already, either they're doing it as a personal change to their own life, and then it's allowed them to go and create like crazy. You want to believe we're getting all the recipes, or they are just they're ready. So we need those champions within the business, the culture, that are leading, that are going to lead the rest, and help them understand that your profits aren't going to go down. You're still going to satisfy and delight your guest by what you're doing. And so, yeah, just making sure that, but it starts internal before we start marketing to our guests. We really have to make sure everybody in the midst internally understands what's going on.
So let's say then there are some food service professionals who are looking to expand into the plant-based world and incorporate some of these ideas. Brad, what business opportunities do you see for these professionals, and how could they incorporate some of your products like the Light Life Burger or the Field Roast Cheese?
That's a good question, actually. I would say, honestly, when you think about like the groups, and so for operators, food service operators, when we're talking to them, we get that question a lot. Actually, is what's the impact of the business going to be? Is it going to cannibalize something else? Am I just going to trade down for something kind of less profitable? And so really, when you think about like the groups and the millennial and Gen X and Gen Z and the core, not that the other groups aren't consumers of the plant-based side of things. But usually when you think about a group of people, one or two in that group is probably going to be either vegetarian, vegan, or just want a plant-based option. Not all the time, like to Donna's point, not all the time, but just maybe more frequently. And so by having something on the menu that's plant-based and does a good job of it too, I would say it's a great concept, or it's unique. It has kind of flavor forward, or it's got great marketing around it, which is also very important. I can talk about that shortly in terms of like menuing and kind of some of the best practices we see. But you think about one or two of those consumers right now, that operator's probably not capturing that sale. Potentially, they might just either not eat or get something smaller, and then potentially get something at home. And so what we've seen for the most part in our Canadian business on the food service side of things is when a plant-based option is new to the menu, there's two things that happen. The first is that usually the incrementality we see is about 5 to 10%, I would say, sustained. So it's not huge. It may not necessarily be, I'm going to get 50% more sales by adding plant-based, right? But that's not necessarily the right approach either, because I don't know if that's sustainable. If it is, great business. But 5 to 10% is kind of what we see. And that's really just coming from that consumer who may or may not have had something at that location. If they didn't offer the plant-based side of things. The second thing and this is kind of really important too, is when we talk to our operators, when operators kind of get involved in plant-based, whether that's one concept on the menu or it's 10. really there's a bit, gives them a bit of a platform to go and create some awareness and some buzz and some marketing. And Stephanie talked about this earlier with like marketing around, the business or the products. There's an overall halo that happens, and it kind of just, it makes that brand, it gives them a platform again, like, so they become newsworthy. So, for example, we did a launch with one of the brands in one of the banners in Canada that does do a lot of those commercials that Donna was talking about, and they've actually seen roughly 20% sustained increase in sales, and that's because they really were invested, went all in, and there was an overall positive halo around that brand. And not only did they get the incrementality and the new sales, the new consumers walking in the door who probably wouldn't have bought something plant-based from them before, but they didn't actually impact the rest of their business. The rest of we actually saw they shared some data with us that indicated that the rest of their major SKUs actually didn't take any type of a dive in that new consumer that probably they wouldn't get previously, because they probably would have eaten elsewhere. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, Alex. Or
Sure, it does. Thank you. And we're going to have some time to discuss even more of these topics in the Q&A coming up. So thank you, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
And for our final question, similar topic for Chef, I would like to know how your plant-based menus have allowed your businesses to reach new audience, but also how they have impacted your food costs.
It's a good question. I think like to reach a new audience, like for sure, everybody that will like people are coming to try something new. So we have like a very open mind clientele, and we're very, very lucky for this. And I think choosing the location of the restaurant was a big part of this. If I'm talking about Senhor in Lisbon, like we're kind of not in the heart of the downtown, on a busy like foot traffic street where people are like hungry, restaurant, hi, can I have a table? We're not this. We're kind of tucked away on a hill, and that is really hard to walk up. And people are coming exactly to have a different experience. And since they're coming with an open mind, it's easy to propose them a lot of things. And the fact that we could explain, and that we take a lot of time to explain the story of where we get the food, it's coming from the farms, and it's presented in this way with this mix of flavor, and we suggest this wine. I think it's like, this is what creates like the buzz. Also, if we talk about like food costs, of course, having a vegetarian or like plant-forward place that do not serve meat will have a different food cost, but I don't believe it's that much lower. I know like what's more expensive is like the meat, the red meat, the caviar and all this stuff, and like here in Lisbon, the like crazy shrimp, the like lagosta and like the lobster and stuff is like flying off the shelves and stuff. And it's like, I know a carrot and a zucchini and a squash is way cheaper, but I think we need to ask chef to make the effort of just getting different ingredients also, and adding like micro sprouts or edible flowers, other kind of ingredient that could seem like that cost a bit more, that could even be close to the caviar price. Like I have some mushrooms that I was wanting to buy this week, and I was like, okay, maybe next week, but I want to do a special dish with cordyceps, but the price per kilo is like really high. And if you're going to farm to table, like I buy all my vegetables from the farmers, and I have like the guy next door that has like a little market, and he's like, you're crazy, you're like, I paid broccoli like half the price, like you can't, I'll sell the broccoli next time. And I'm like, no, like there's something special about this broccoli, and that's what I'm looking for. For me, the freshness is like unbeatable. It's like this broccoli, I send a WhatsApp message saying, okay, I want 5 broccoli tomorrow. She goes, she picks them, she puts them in her car, and then she drives like 40 minutes to Lisbon, and she's like, here you go. She drops me the broccoli. This broccoli hasn't gone to like another warehouse or whatever. Like for me, it's freshness. So I'm yes paying more on my food costs, but it's very nice to to use these products. And in Portugal, like it's amazing because there's sun all year round also, and it's like really nice to have like super fresh food and to use them. And I think it really makes a difference if you I remember back in the days when like I was in like 18 years old and I was trying to be a vegetarian. I was going to some of the organic like health food store, and I will be like, wow, everything here looks rotten and looks like yellow, and that's sad. Like, do I really want to eat this? Will I feel electric to eat this? Am I changing the world eating this? Like, maybe not. Like, it's so I think I'm looking at some restaurants that are kind of like farm to table like me, but serving meat product. And I look at the price on their menu and I'm like, why their price should be different than my price? Why do I have to put everything cheaper because I have vegetable based menu? And I'm trying for sure, we have to be reasonable with like the price of the market also, and like understand like what people could afford, and like so that we could survive. But I'm trying to understand that there's the cost of the primary, like the matière première, the food in itself. There's the work that we put around it. Like we will do different techniques sometimes that it's like, the food cost is quite low, but man, it takes 3 days just to do this one portion. Like, and if you don't organize yourself and you miss one of those 3 days, we have some sauce that we marinate for like 48 hours and then finish it with other stuff. Like, and it's the secret of it. So we need to think about all of this when we look at the food cost and stuff. But I think people understand, and like what is touching me even more is the price of the wine. We're like serving low intervention wines, and it's really hard for people to understand. It's like, why a wine could be this much and a wine could be this much? Like, why there's such a price difference in a bottle of fermented grape juice? Because there's like so many different ways of doing it, and like companies that could sell a wine bottle really low probably have a lot of machine around and like have ways to shortcut all the costs that it takes to produce these bottles. And if you do it like with more intention and like really have like more hands-on work, then your cost, you're like, wow, I produced this bottle and it cost me way much more than the average people that are making wine, but it's a different product. It's kind of an artisan product. And I really want to like feature this in my restaurant, in my menu. So I wouldn't go for like the cheaper carrot. I will probably go with the most expensive carrot, and I hope people will understand, and I hope they will taste the difference. I hope
Thank
it
you.
answers the question.
Thank you, Chef. We started discussing carrots. We're ending our panel with carrots. We've come full circle as we head to our Q&A session. I would like to thank our three panelists, of course, for such an engaging conversation. And I'm sure our audience has some other questions on the topics we covered. Thank you to those who have already submitted questions. If you've not yet had a chance to do so, please consider submitting a question for our panelists through the Q&A feature. We have one here for any of our panelists who would like to answer. Thank you, Eleanor, for your question. Eleanor writes, one of the key concerns mentioned by chefs during our meetings as part of the Canadian University Plant-Based Initiative is that students will eat elsewhere if the chefs increase plant-based meals at the expense of animal-based meals. This would potentially negatively impact their profitability. How can chefs mitigate this risk and possibly even increase their bottom line like the University of Cambridge did? Does anyone want to begin with a shot at that?
The price of the vegan or the vegetarian dish was more expensive?
It says, this would potentially negatively impact their profitability because students will eat elsewhere if the chefs increase plant-based meals and decrease animal-based meals.
I don't agree. Maybe they'll just, I guess it's the way it's presented, right? Like Donna was explaining, if it's like, today only a new thing, and like if it's a place where you have to eat all the time and it's more of a functional meal, it's not like, oh, it's a birthday of a friend, we're going out. Like, it's a functional meal. It's like, I'm not ready today to bake a change, I'm just between two classes and I need to study in my head, and I think it's the way it will be presented, like keeping the flexitarian approach and having like something comfortable, like the meat and potato Brad was talking about, and having something off to the side and maybe sampling it, like Donna was talking about.
Oh, yeah, and also having the base as a plant-based item where I can add quality meats and poultry and seafood if I wish. So you're not making them have a this or that. It's here it is, complete, plant-based, gives you everything you need. But if you want to add other things to it, we have those as well. But doing, and again, that thoughtfulness though, even the animal proteins that you are, using, making sure that they are thoughtful, right? Like quality, Canadian as much as we can, that kind of thing. Right?
Have any of you had an experience like that where a guest may be less inclined to eat your offerings if they are increased with the plant-based ratio compared to the meat or animal-based meals?
For us, it's when we have like a vegan station, for example, the old fashioned, put all the plant-based stuff over there, for only those who are going to eat it. That will bring more, because it makes it not inclusive, right? But where we haven't had any issues in that we are not trying to make everything plant-based in an entire environment, right? We are making sure that those other options are there. But again, more geared towards a flexitarian type of style of eating.
We saw this at first before when Love was not completely vegan. It had cheese option, like organic cheese from Quebec, and it was like you could have the vegan cheese that we were proposing, but you could have the organic cheese. Yeah. If that's more comfortable to try the veggie burger with real cheese, like or animal cheese. I don't have to say real. They could all be real. I think that really helped a lot for the people that was maybe scared and they're like, not sure. At least this is something, okay, this is something I know, I'm comfortable with this, and it's melted on top, it looks yummy and it tastes good, and it worked very well.
Brad, I know you're coming from this from a different perspective, but did you want to add anything to this conversation?
No, I think they hit it on perfectly. I was actually just looking at one of your questions that came up around the burger, which I can kind of touch on unless I agree with, honestly, I haven't seen that. I haven't heard that too much from our K through 12 and our universities side of things, but like I said, there's all kinds of feedback and questions that come up around plant-based and sensitivity and things like that. Substitutions, I think, like Donna kind of hit on, like offering substitutions and making sure it's kind of like marketed properly would probably be the best way to combat that. But no, I would say the other two answered it perfectly well.
Thank you. And thank you again, Eleanor, for that question. We will move on then to the question from Megan, and perhaps, Brad, you could start off with your answer. Megan asked,
yeah,
I'll just read out the question first. How should we deal with and address comparison comments and remarks, i.e. plant-based burger doesn't taste like a beef burger? Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, and I guess 2 points. We get this often, obviously, and it really depends on the consumer. Depends on what their expectations are. Everyone's got expectations in their head of what something's going to be. I'll try and give my point of view on it, and I'd love to hear Stéphanie's kind of how maybe she combats that or answers that, handles that from like a chef point of view. But for us, really, it's about expectations. And so, really, I mean, let's be honest, like it's not animal protein. It's never going to be animal protein. Whenever we have products and things like that, we're very clear in saying this is a 100% plant-based product, right? It's not a exact replica knockoff of beef. Beef has its own unique taste that comes through the fat, proteins, things like that give it that. And so really, we're just trying to make something comparable. You're always going to get some degree of aroma, which is what people often say, like when they try something plant-based, it might be that, if it's pea protein based, it might give a bit of an aroma to it, or soy sometimes will have that. Even a lot of grains and that type of thing can have that like almost dry kind of what you get from the fat. And so one just is conditioning, obviously that it's nothing's ever going to be 100% like animal protein. It's plant-based. It's 100% plant-based. And then trying to work on some of the claims, like, but it's cholesterol free. It's vegan. It's got lower saturated fat, same amount of protein you're going to get, things like that. But what I would also say, would be like, if that's the perception, then try it again in 6 months, because I can tell you, like what we sell currently today, it won't be the same in 6 months. Like in this, I think this kind of just goes with the industry. I've never seen kind of like a segment move with such pace. The innovation is constantly changing. What you try today will be very different 6 months from now, or even 3 months from now. For an example, there's been, I think Beyond just did it with the updated burger they have in the US, which, you know, essentially just added a bit more fat to it to give a bit more that to help replicate beef a little bit more. Impossible does a very good job. I'll be honest, like it's not our company, but Impossible does a very, very good job of replicating animal protein, through the heme that they use in it. So I guess I would just say, if that's the perception then, and you can't change it, that could be very different 3 or 4 months from now, because there's iterations that come constantly. Like I said, it's all about pace, it's all about innovation, it's all about clean ingredient decks. So just trying to level set them that it's never gonna be animal protein, and that it could be very different, and to have an open mind is gonna be key. But I'd love to hear like Stephanie's point of view and how she, like from a chef, like how she answers that. Because
Well, like if they're doing the move to eat like a plant-based burger, it's a plant-based burger. It shouldn't be close to the meat taste at all.
Like, or just to know the
Oh, I think I think the internet is lagging a little bit, but yeah, what I wanted to say is like, I like the remarks or comment and like, how do you explain that it doesn't taste like a meat? It's like, we have to explain and not hide that it's like from pea protein. It's like, we have to say it's made with herbs, it's made with soy, it's made with like different aromatic profile and like different spice with curry. Like we need to talk about that part of the patty, you know, and like, why are you choosing to eat this like plant-based burger? It's because obviously you want to cut off on meat, or it's because of your health, or because you're doing a lot of sport, or because you don't like the way the animals are treated and you cannot have like a conscious meat around in your burger right now, or like I think we need to present it in the other way, and we should push the chef and the company of this world to make these burgers taste different than chicken or beef and stuff like that, and really taste like beets or parsley or lupini beans. Like, and I really agree with Brad. Like, it's moving. This food business is moving so fast. This like trend, like already in the past 10 years, it has evolved incredibly. But just like every month, there's something new going on, and there's different ways of doing this, and like people are changing really fast. So, and even us, our taste change, because we're constantly changing as human being. With we get older and our life changed, we evolve, and we feel this stuff differently. And like, from I eat like a plant-based burger last year, I eat it today, and I eat it next year, I will also taste it differently. So I think it's important keep an open mind and explain what it is, and keep it real.
And for those who want it, the whole blending thing, right? So you have to sometimes come in the middle, where it's just, it's 30% mushroom or lentils or whatever. And so you're trying to get people, because it's just like sodium, it's just like sugar, it's just like everything else. People have to come where they are, and then you start to get them to move along their line. But you can't just go, for some, it might not work cold turkey. Like, it might not go from this to this and love it. You kind of have to go down a path where you're making adjustments and getting used to that, and then moving on to the next thing.
Thank you very much again for that question, Megan, and I apologize if I said Megan the first time. Brad, this is a good chance to get to another question for you. As a sales and strategy expert, what are some marketing or menuing tips you can provide to food service professionals?
Sales strategy expert, interesting. I'm more of a plant-based guy. I just think about myself walking into a store. We kind of touched on it actually a little bit earlier. It's really about, when you think about menuing, it's not necessarily just isolating like over to the corner, like Donna was talking about, like, oh, here's the plant-based options over here. I mean, there are some examples of where chains do that, but for the most part, we kind of see success with just making it front and center, right beside the animal protein equivalent. And just so it's an option. It's a substitution. It's something different. It's not shoved off to the corner, because a lot of flexitarians aren't necessarily going to think about going into, so when you've got a kind of an isolated plant-based section per se, they're not necessarily going to gravitate there. They're just going to look for what they're familiar with. And so, kind of incorporating it versus the animal protein side of things and offering it kind of on par is usually kind of what we see show up as successful. But again, it does depend on the operator and kind of what their layout of their store is and their look and feel. The other thing I would say is I saw a study once on green beans of all things, and it was kind of like what the joke about carrots, but it was like making things sexy and making things like just delicious and appealing, and using kind of words to drum it up, to create some buzz around it. The study was around green beans, and if which green beans sold the most, and the first one was green beans. The second one was like green beans sauteed in olive oil and a little bit of sprinkle of salt, and there was one more. Then there was one more. It was like sweet and savory green beans with something, and that one sold something like 30 or 40%. I have a slide somewhere with it. 30% more than just the standard green bean, because it was people want to be kind of lured a little bit. They want to, and so just kind of incorporating it into the menu, kind of alongside the animal protein equivalent, as well as, don't be afraid to make it sexy. Don't be afraid to, to make it flashy, using choice words, savory, delectable, things like that. It's okay. And I would also say, again, like vegan and vegetarian, like having those kind of claims on menu, again, can be a bit gray in some areas, and they can be very sensitive to some people. And so really just, if you want to play it safe, and I'm happy to talk about this anytime afterwards with anybody, they can just email me. But like I said, leading with plant-based is your safe bet. Always plant-based. If you think about it, like there's commercials all over. I'm in Canada, but there's commercials all over where plant-based, plant-based dairy dessert. There's a grandfather going to try plant-based key lime pie with his son at the cottage, and he's blown away by this. This is plant-based. And so plant-based is one of the taglines you're going to see everywhere, right? It's constantly Googled plant-based. So, if you're unsure of claims and things like that, just lead with plant-based. There's no percentage of a product that it has to be plant-based in order to call it plant-based. If it's made up of X amount of percentage, like if you've got, a plant-based burger with, a regular cheese slice on it, you can still call it plant-based burger. So that's kind of some suggestions that we kind of give to our partners.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you for that. We do have someone who has raised their hand, and we're going to unmute them now. Jean-Francois, would you like to ask your question to the group? We've just asked them to unmute. While we're waiting for that, while we're waiting for Jean-Francois, I will ask you, Donna, if you were able to share any stories or examples of success, whether big or small, from your plant-based work so far.
Like I said, it is early, but the success is, again, college, university, easiest, right? But I know I had shared a couple stories with others, but really it's the aha in the internal group. So the chefs just kind of having their aha moments and starting to really experiment. But when you think about college, university, right, we're already over 55%, 60% plant-based. Like if you think about the actual things that are getting produced, on the menu every day in a residential style dining, it's a lot of plant-based now. So I would think that that's really success because it continues to grow, and people are generally interested in trying all the new things that we're doing. And then the other thing is just making sure, the other success I would have to say too is keeping it still scratch, right? For us is staying true to our brand, which is scratch. And then, so as we think about new items, we're making sure that we are actually, that they are allowing chefs to still make it scratch, right? Versus it's everything's pre-made and I'm just assembling. So we're making sure that what we are doing, we're cautious of that and sticking to our brand.
Thanks, Donna. That's great. We've discussed so much about advice and ways to begin, ways to have success in the plant-based world. But Chef, I'm going to ask you, for a starting point, what advice do you have for a food service professional looking to begin serving plant-based foods or to expand their plant-based menus? Where do they actually begin? What's the first step?
They need to make it tasty. For I think first of all, like they need to create a recipe that tastes really good and that they're confident in, and it needs to start from this, I believe, like because this is sometimes where the problem is of like someone wanted to like increase and then they don't know what to do, and they're like, okay, the part of the menu that is like plant-based is getting a bit boring, and then people are like, okay, well, I'll order the now more restrained menu of the meat option. That yeah, I think it's important to like go around and be inspired to be able to and to taste a lot of stuff yourself. To I don't know, like I love traveling, so I always went to be obsessed. Okay, now I'm in Barcelona, I go everywhere where it's vegan. Now I'm in New York, now I'm in California, and like going to study and research and be like, okay, and just going to a grocery store and buying everything what the food company are doing too. They're super, like big companies too are super on the trend, and they can't afford doing all this research. So I think it's important to have a very tasty and like something that is good and strong, and then move on to that.
Great. Well, you mentioned taste, of course, being such a great testing point for these foods. And Brad, you also mentioned the surprise that some people might have at the key lime pie, for example, when they realize it is plant-based. That is my question for you, Brad. What your advice would be for food service professionals who have guests who are skeptical of plant-based analogs, what you would recommend they do in those cases?
Yeah, and I think this really just echo what I said earlier with the question that Megan had. Was really just, if that's the perception, then try it again in 3 months. Honestly, oftentimes, people will have tried a product. My dad being one of them, he tried the plant-based product 2 or 3 years ago, and it was kind of dry. Maybe it didn't hit the nail on the head. It wasn't all the way to bright in terms of being a beef burger. But then fast forward a year or two, and there's the products out there now are so different. They're like I said, they can do a much better job of kind of replicating the animal protein, but that doesn't always necessarily mean it's the right way to do it. And so, like, I liked Stephanie's point earlier about just don't be afraid to try new ingredients, try new things. Obviously, we're the Greenleaf and Maple Leaf is in it. Obviously, there's a business side of you, like a point of view. Sorry. But like our PD teams are also working with mushrooms and things like that, like already just in terms of the next thing. We've got a burger, we've got pepperoni, we've got cheese, things like that. But it's also working with these different types of alternative proteins, like I said, mung bean protein, things like that, fava bean protein, and like I said, mushrooms. We're already designing like a shaved steak which is made of mushrooms. So if that's the perception, then again, and just encourage them to keep an open mind and try it again when they're ready, because it'll be very, very different from when they had it that day.
Thanks, Brad. We just have a few minutes remaining before our closing comments. I would just invite each of you to, if you'd like, to just give 1 minute of some final thoughts, some lasting words that you'd like to share with our audience, perhaps. Donna, do you have anything else you would like to add to this conversation?
Just in relation to marketing, is just making sure, like I know Stephanie said put it forward, but even when you're listing out stuff on the menu, put the plant thing first. So like it's always, we tend to traditionally put it on the last item listed. So you have 3 items, you list it last. So just really putting it up at the top and let it be the first thing I read. Right?
I think my little advice will be keep trying. A bit like Brad said, like maybe you went to the wrong restaurant and that person is like, it happened to me this week. I had a muffin that was terrible. It was so dry and like, so like, who would enjoy eating this? I was like, okay, so I left it there and I was like, it's okay. Maybe they had a hard week with low staff and whatever, but like keep trying. Like it doesn't mean it's not good everywhere. Like there's tons of places, like just here in Lisbon, that are opening up and doing really different stuff. Like there's no, oh, the plant or the vegetarian dish today is a mushroom risotto. Like, no, like everybody's going crazy, even like super original and creative. And I think it's really important to keep trying and to move around, and then you'll see how good it can be.
Yeah, and I can build on that as well. I mean, think about it too. It's just variety. I mean, you're going to see more and more products out there now that are going to be offered on a plant-based side of things, at least from the plant-based meat side of things. But that also goes for the other sectors as well, like cheeses, milks, things like that. There's now, obviously, you've got plant-based eggs with that's just come out in Canada as well, which is a fantastic product. But like I said, I mean, you're not going to love every single plant-based thing that you try. It's the same as you wouldn't love every single animal, kind of product that you would try, right? And so, just have an open mind to it. Think about why you want to try it, why you want to incorporate it. Whether you're doing it for a business side of point of view, or for yourself. What's the driving reason for it? Look at the ingredient text, do your research. I think that's really, really important. There are a lot of really, really crappy plant-based stuff out there. Just because you're plant-based does not mean that you're healthy, right? And so, challenge your vendor partners and look at the ingredient decks and things like that. Yeah, I would say that's it. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't feel like any question on the plant-based side of things, regardless of who you're asking it to, is a bad question, because like I said, things change so fast. So your question is always a valid one. We get all kinds of questions on the business side of things. So.
Thank you very much. And just to conclude, we have a nice comment here from Seemain. Says, I was able to add little by little to my son's food, and now he eats more than 6 veggies and raw salad as well. I am happy. So thank you for that comment. We have reached the end of our Q&A session. I would like to thank our panelists, our sponsors, and our excellent audience for today's event. I will now hand it over to Rihanna for our closing statements. And once again, I thank you everyone for your participation.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in our second Forward Food webinar of the year, the business case for plant-based, how food companies can profit from the plant-based revolution. I really want to thank our wonderful panelists for their excellent and thoughtful contributions to today's discussion. Your passion was palpable, and your enthusiasm for this subject is absolutely contagious. I also want to, of course, thank Floating Leaf Flying Foods and Cultured for their generous sponsorship of today's event. We will do the draw after the webinar and contact the 12 lucky winners soon. And finally, thank you to our audience for both attending and submitting such important questions. We hope that regardless of what brought you to our webinar today, you have learned more about the benefits of plant-based foods and their exciting business potential. So I have posted the link to the video that Alex mentioned earlier in the chat, along with our contact information and how to find us online, in case you'd like to get in touch or work with Forward Food. And we will host our next webinar in just a few months, so please stay tuned and look out for more information online. The other webinars that we host this year will explore different but equally interesting topics related to plant-based eating. So thank you so much for your interest in plant-based foods, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.